A majority of curlers have second jobs because, again, there hasn't ever been a professional ecosystem built into the sport. It's a very unique sport where the audience existed, but the monetization infrastructure didn't.
Meet Nic Sulsky, co-founder and CEO of the Curling Group, reimagining curling as a year-round global sport. A serial sports entrepreneur rewriting the playbook. This is Nic Sulsky. Let's go.
I think value comes from integration, not from acquisition. And I think a lot of the investors now are buying value instead of trying to build it.
What do betting companies or fantasy sports businesses understand more about customer acquisition and fan engagement that sports leagues do not?
It's a very good question. The biggest challenge that sports betting companies and fantasy companies have is figuring out
Welcome back to the Berkida Podcast. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by Nic Sulsky. He's the founder and CEO of the Curling Group. Thank you for being with us today. Nic has one of the more unusual journeys, let's say, in the world of sports business. He has built companies across fantasy sports, gaming, and sports betting, including Monkey Knife Fight and PointsBet Canada, before turning his attention to curling, which is a sport that obviously takes the attention of everybody during the Winter Olympics. But I guess we'll be discussing in this podcast how to make it a more recurring occasion for people to enjoy, during every year, not just every 4 years, as sometimes it happens. So today, I guess we'll be discussing how entrepreneurship, sports betting, sports ownership, IP are one of the most attractive investment opportunities in sport that exist today. And I'm very pleased to be discussing this with Nic today. Nic, welcome to the podcast.
Massimo, thank you so much for having me. It's a true pleasure. I've really enjoyed listening to you in my ear holes, man. It's been a pleasure, and it's been great having some conversations with you as well.
Well, you're too kind, and we are very, very, very pleased to have you today. And look, as I was saying, if one looks at your CV, probably would assume that your next venture after sports betting would have been something in the world of gaming or betting. And instead, you end up buying a curling property. But maybe, why don't we start from, your Monkey Knife Fight and PointsBet, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about what attracts you to the world of fantasy sports and gaming, and perhaps how that translated into sport?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think what really drew me to fantasy sports, what drew me to sports betting, and what's drawn me to curling, it's all very similar. I like having fun when I'm watching sports. What drew me to fantasy sports was it has become the biggest social game that has ever been invented. Fantasy sports over the last number of decades has blown up. And what got me excited about fantasy sports was it made the experience of watching sports more fun. You get to know the athletes better. You get deeper into the game. Sports betting, as it became regulated and legalized within North America, became the natural step in my career, because ultimately it's all about engagement, right? What betting has taught me, well, fantasy sports first, and what betting taught me is that the real currency in sports is engagement, right? Your job, my job, is to create an experience that allows the fans to get deeper into it, to have more fun. And what drew me to curling was really no different. I wasn't looking for curling, but after working within PointsBet Canada and getting to know the sport through a partnership with the national federation in Canada, what struck me about curling, it's a very unique sport where the audience existed, but the monetization infrastructure didn't, right? And as any entrepreneur or business builder will tell you, it's opportunity that really drives you. And there was this big stereotype around curling that existed, and to a certain degree, it still exists. And when I experienced my very first curling event in person, I saw that stereotype literally blow up right in front of my eyes, because what a curling event is and who a curler is isn't what most people think. And when a stereotype gets blown up in front of my eyes, it gets me very excited, because if I had something wrong, I think other people did as well.
Amazing. Wow. Look, it's quite interesting, what you were saying. You like to have fun, and I guess, that's why people engage so well with gaming and fantasy sports, right? And I guess that says that those organizations are quite good at engaging with fans, right? What do betting companies or, fantasy sports businesses understand more about customer acquisition and fan engagement that sports leagues do not?
It's a very good question. I mean, I think the biggest challenge that sports betting companies and fantasy companies have is figuring out a product or an element that differentiates them from other folks, right?
Hmm.
Within the gambling and the fantasy sports world, there are a lot of companies that are effectively just customer acquisition tools where they're offering users bonuses, rewards, free money to come and join their app. But unless you have a product that separates you from other operators, you're going to churn that user extraordinarily quickly. So I
Hmm.
think, the thing that excited me, and I think it's no different than the sports world, right? Operating a gambling company and operating, two sports properties now, both a professional league and, a traditional, call it the majors of curling, we're competing against all of the other sports out there. We're competing for audience attention, right? So it's how do you differentiate yourself in the market to not only appeal to a user to come and try you out, but then to stay with you. And I think that's where within the sports world, content has become so important and the storytelling behind the sport. Because the sport on a playing surface is one thing, but what I think any operator and when any league or property needs to really think about is how do you keep those audience members, those consumers, those users engaged in between sporting events. It's easy to keep people excited when they're watching something happen in real time, right? When they're
Hmm.
watching an
Yeah.
amazing basketball game, baseball game, or a diving competition. To call back to one of your previous guests,
Yes.
but how do you keep those people, those consumers engaged in between events? That's where storytelling comes in. That's where athletes come in. And Massimo, I have to tell you, what made me fall in love with curling wasn't the sport. Hey, I like the sport. I love the sport now. I'm not a curler. I think, as I mentioned, it's the curlers. These are incredible athletes, men and women, mind you, who have amazing stories, are incredibly relatable, are smart, funny, attractive, elite athletes. It's their stories that got me excited, which obviously prompted me to get out of the gaming world and jump headfirst into to an emerging, some call it niche sport, but I call it underserved or underappreciated sport.
I think something I can definitely subscribe to, assets, or athletes or content that is underappreciated or underexploited, right? So, that's underserved, actually, as you correctly said. So, what was the vision? And maybe why don't you tell us a little bit more about what the curling group does and what is the vision behind the curling group?
Yeah, I mean, I think curling is the number one, if not one of the top most watched sports every Winter Olympics, right? I knew that.
Mhm.
I knew that going in as I started peeling back the onion and learning about the sport. And that was very exciting because curling truly has a global audience. But, where people see a sport, what I saw was an ecosystem that we could innovate and that we could build a moat around and own, right? So, you know, I don't think you modernize sports by changing what fans love. You modernize them by changing how fans experience what they love. And so I saw a sport that millions of people all around the world fall in love with every 4 years. Folks in Canada have been in love with it for decades. And yet it was typically like the very first property that we bought was the Grand Slam of curling. And I'll get to the kind of the vision. The Grand Slam of
Hmm.
curling was owned by Rogers Sportsnet, which is they're the biggest sports media company in Canada. They had owned it for 23 years before we acquired it. Yeah, the Grand Slam of curling, which is akin to the majors in golf and tennis. There are 5 major events every year. It's the 16 best men's teams and the 16 best women's teams in the world. So better curling than the Olympics because it's not tied to one team per gender per country. And they compete over 6 days. And Rogers Sportsnet is a Canadian-owned media company that never distributed the content outside of the country. So even though this was a sport that blew up every 4 years, that was played by incredible athletes from Japan, from Korea, from Switzerland, from Italy, from Scotland, from Norway, from the United States, Sweden, that's right, gold medalists behind me. Nobody in those countries were able to engage with that content. So the very first step of the vision was, let's build the ecosystem, right? First, we bought the Grand Slam of curling from Rogers Sportsnet. The very first thing that we did was we built our own OTT and fast platform called Rock Channel, which would allow us to distribute the Grand Slam of curling content to fans all over the world without having to be beholden to rights deals or bigger content distributors, because as we all know, that those deals are sometimes hard and for certain organizations expensive because not everybody gets rights fees for their deals. So we wanted to make sure that people could watch curling first and foremost, right? So that was the first thing that we did. Then we partnered with Alt Sports Data, and we built the first live data stats collection platform and live odds algorithm projections API, which would allow sports betting operators to finally offer sports betting in curling. Back to how we started our conversation. It's all about engagement. It's all about fun, right? It goes back to that point that I was saying about modernizing sports. You change how fans experience how they love. You don't change the sport. And then the whole part of that, the final part of the vision, which was, like I said, building a flywheel around the sport and a new ecosystem that we could effectively own and build a moat around, was to use the Grand Slam of curling, our new media platform, new live data, the relationship that we had built with the curlers themselves and the international federations, which was very, very important, to launch the first ever professional curling league called Rock League, which launched in April. So the vision was, here is an underserved sport that has never been modernized, but has a massive global audience played by both men and women that's already in the Olympics. So let's build a structure and an ecosystem to allow curling fans and casual sports fans who love it every 4 years a way to have more fun with this sport.
Great. And look, it's actually very, very remarkable what you're saying, right? I mean, this is a sport is already on the Olympics, so obviously must have, some sort of global participation, otherwise it cannot be in the Olympics, but still did not have that sort of distribution, the sort of recognition, the sort of obviously had the participation, otherwise it wouldn't be in the Olympics, but it wasn't able to be served properly. And can I pick a little bit on the fact that you say you build your own OTT? I mean, I spent time obviously in 11 sports looking at, building and serving, smaller sport community. In particular, it was around football. To be fair, we bought a business that was called Mycujo, that was basically selling a lot of lower division football. How did you find that, building that OTT platform? Did you build the capabilities? Did you rely on third parties? How did you build the distribution? Do you build a subscription service? How did you do that? I mean, tell us a bit more about that.
We are still a startup, but I have some great folks on our team. We built an internal. We had great partners with JW Player and Amagi helped us with the fast channel, JW with our OTT. Money solves a lot of problems. Now we did raise a seed round in September of 2024, which helped facilitate. We acquired the Grand Slam of curling in April of 2024, closed our a seed in September, but we had some initial funding by me and some others that allowed us to make sure that when our first Grand Slam of curling event happened under our ownership, which was October of 2024, that we had an OTT platform live. And, we had it built. We streamed for the first time ever. Typically the Grand Slam of curling, which was owned by Rogers Sportsnet, as I mentioned, they would only start broadcasting on Thursdays. They would do 3 games a day, and only in Canada. Well, Tuesday, October 1st, 2024 was our very first Grand Slam of curling event in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. And on that very first morning, we had a stream of all 4 games going on in the morning. There's 16 games a day, four draws, four games a draw, 16. That's math. So on that Tuesday morning, we had all 4 games streaming, and it was all organic. We didn't spend any money marketing. It was word of mouth because the curling community, is quite committed, right? So the word of mouth stretched. And I will say, Massimo, one of my proudest moments in my career, and not even proud, just moments that really made me smile. It was after the first game. The first game was like 8 a.m. Eastern in Prince Edward, in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. And it was about 11 or 10:45 after the first game. I'm standing in our production office, and a Swiss curler who had just been playing came off the ice. And he walked up to me and he said, "Thank you." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, for the first time, my family and my friends were able to watch me at a Grand Slam of curling event." And I was like, man, like that, of course, we're in this to make money and we're in this to grow the sport, but that to me was so important. So, we basically, for the first year, well, actually, literally up in like for the first year, we produced a stream of every single game, every single sheet. Not every game had commentary on it, but we allowed users to just watch anything they wanted. Because all the great thing about curling, or one of the other great things about curling, there's no masks, there's no helmets, and all the curlers are mic'd. So even if there's no commentators, fans are able to hear the curlers communicate with each other and strategize live during the game, which is super interesting. So we launched, we had Rock Channel, we have Rock Channel, we streamed all of the games for free. What we did in conjunction with Rock League, which launched in April, and our partner for Rock League was CBC in Canada. We had ESPN Plus in the United States, DAZN globally, BBC iPlayer, and Naver Sports in Korea, alongside Rock Channel. But what we did was we produced one featured sheet every game, and there were 3 games a day. And then the other 2 sheets of ice we offered up behind a paywall for users to subscribe for. So for the first time ever, we did put some content behind a paywall. And what was really exciting was that 10% of all of our subs paid for that premium content.
Extra.
And that paid extra. Well, they were getting
Extra content.
That's right. And there was no commentary on that content. They just wanted to watch it, which was really, really exciting. So, we're just ending. Well, we just went through 2 Grand Slam of curling seasons and 1 Rock League season. And again, the OTT fast strategy constantly evolves. But now we've tested with some of the premium content, and users seem to really enjoy it. So I think we'll probably keep kind of iterating down that road.
So in, let's say, a couple of years, right? You have acquired sports assets and you've already launched a new sports league. I mean, that's quite a lot. I mean, in terms of, the sport league, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from launching, and, what do you think is going to be the key driver of building the league?
The biggest driver of, what I think is going to build I would say not even a league, it's a sport, right? Because I look at curling, we have a league, but we also have the Grand Slam. So we have the professional ecosystem of the sport. The number one driver, I believe, is producing the right amount of content and story to be able to deliver to the younger demographic, or the new, I wouldn't say younger, I'd say the new sports fan. Let's face it, sports fans now watch sports differently than we ever did when we were growing up. There are a number of different ways that sports fans can tap into the live sports themselves. And I think curling as a sport, I now find it so exciting. It's so strategic. There are compelling, exciting, like high drama moments at the end of every end. And in the slams, there's 8 ends, and in Rock League, there's 7 ends. High drama. But to me, I think what's going to really drive this sport is the amount of content that we're producing. We have an incredible internal content team to appeal to that new style of sports fan that wants, the 60-second or the 30-second highlight clips, or wants the behind the scenes interaction with the athletes themselves. They want that authenticity, and they want that ability to get closer to the athlete and to the sport that they love, right? I mean, every sport, there's typically like kind of five revenue levers, right? There's ticketing, there's rights, there's sponsorship, there's F&B, if they own the the real estate, and there's licensing, right? Like, so, but from a fan perspective, the fan excitement and engagement kind of fuels, that whole
Yeah.
engine. And a lot of people, at the end of the day, you and I both know how much money is being invested in sport now, right? Be
Hmm.
whether it's family office or private equity or high net worth, and whether it's, European football teams or North American soccer teams or baseball teams, basketball teams, all of these sports are getting unbelievable multiples, and, you're driving a lot of excitement. But, for me, like, I like the challenge, and I love the opportunity of building value rather than buying it, right? Because I think
Yeah.
the best investments aren't always the best assets. They're the assets with the most room to improve, right? So all the puzzle pieces that we have within this sport, men and women, already in the Olympics, truly global audience. I mean, Japan was our second most watched audience last year, between our broadcast and streaming for the Grand Slam of curling. Like, over 11 million people watch the slams. Our second biggest audience is Japan. That's pretty exciting. So when we talk about assets that have room to improve, man, I see a sport with all of the ingredients, and of course I'm biased. Like, of course I am, right? Part of my job is telling the story and selling the
Yeah.
vision of curling, but the
Well,
pieces,
there are data points.
yeah,
There are
we
data
have the
points.
data points. And so, to get back to the first question that you asked, like, what's one of the key drivers? I mean, not to be not to be too simplistic, like, we need money to fuel the engine, right? Like, most leagues, it costs a lot of money to, not necessarily to operate the leagues. Of course, those are expensive, but marketing, awareness, creating the right professional governance and infrastructure so you can create value for not only your current shareholders, but your potential future investors. And from a Rock League perspective, the potential future acquirers of the franchises that we've built, because TCG is, we own and operate all of Rock League. It's a, own and operated model. So finding capital to help fuel the engine and drive our ecosystem forward, obviously, I mean, money solves some problems, doesn't fix them, but it could definitely help escalate and grow better, faster, bigger, right?
No, look, I definitely can see, how the passion, in these projects is something that is clearly, it's really something you believe in, and clearly the passion you have for it is very visible. One of the things I guess that wanted to pick on is the fact that you said, how important it is to also build content, right? You were talking about how you've been focusing on the storytelling, how much storytelling I guess the sport has, which maybe is has been, as you were saying before, underserved. But how do you build something, maybe particularly on the content side, that has got year-end engagement? Because I guess, one of the things, we believe at Berkida Ventures is that ultimately lots of sports properties are really IP businesses, right? It could be, that's why, I mean, even my career, I started as a media banker, right? And that's how I ended up covering sports. So, storytelling clearly is so important. You need to build storytelling, I guess, that is, we're already talking about beyond the 4-year Olympic event. So what is your plan? I mean, how do you keep the engagement high during the rest of the year? What are you thinking about that?
Well, it goes back to something I was talking about before. These curlers are incredible personalities from all over the world, men and women. One of the very first things that we did when we took over the slams back in 2024 was we built a kind of a marketing playbook for the athletes, right? Because I do believe, and I've
Mhm.
said this before, like, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? They're in this with us, because the better we are at growing the scale of the sport, bringing more eyeballs to the sport, more sponsors to the sport, more revenue into the sport, there will be a trickle down into the athletes themselves, right? A majority of curlers have second jobs because, again, there hasn't ever been a professional ecosystem built into the sport. So when we talk about how to keep audiences engaged in the sport of curling in between events, I mean, it's the athletes, it's the curlers, it's their stories. We have athletes on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Twitch and Snap producing their own, creating their own content and their own connections with fans every day, right? It's not just big media and big stories, which happen from time to time in curling. It's the training videos of seeing these young athletes in June, even though curling season doesn't officially start till September, working out, right? Or playing golf with each other and having fun, or going on vacation to Greece with their boyfriends. Like everybody, I should say everybody, a lot of people within the social and content ecosystem now wants to feel closer to athletes, to celebrity, to each other, right? Like the games themselves, that's the content, right? But our business is the IP, right? The IP is how we're going to grow real value. Now, the curlers, of course, and the content, the authentic content that they're creating is not necessarily something that we're going to monetize during the off season, but will that create more awareness and more excitement for the upcoming curling season? Absolutely. Will that give more opportunities for sponsors to engage with those athletes without needing us to funnel that to them? Absolutely. Will that provide us with new opportunities to engage sponsors once the curling season begins? Absolutely. Does that give us the opportunity to create our own exclusive content with potential partners and athletes in the off season? Absolutely too, right? Like having the support of the athletes is one of the most exciting and important things that we've been able to accomplish within the sport. And there is no fragmentation. You know, a lot of other emerging leagues that are growing struggle because there's a bunch of different ownership groups who are jockeying for position within the ecosystem that they're playing in. And there's a bunch of athletes who have to pick and choose where they are participating and who they're collaborating with. You know, the great thing about what we've created is we've created kind of a unified world of curling where the athletes themselves have bought in. And the next generation of sports value, in my opinion, will come from deeper fan relationships, right? That's where, that to me is where the that's where the real upside is.
Got it. And do you think you have also, something put it another way? Do you think betting has a role to play as well for curling? Has curling been able to benefit from engagement on the betting side? Is there more to come there?
Oh, there's so much more to come there. I mean, it's so nascent, right? A majority, and not to get too kind of nerdy, most, if not all, curling betting up until this point has all been pre-match core markets, and only a few operators offer it. With our partnership with Alt, now there's finally live data and live projections that will allow operators to offer live markets in curling. And one of the exciting things about our sport, and I'll speak from a North American lens because that's where I'm living right now. There are very few live sports on at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday. And the one thing I've learned, Massimo, in my journeys in the gambling world is there's one thing that gamblers love more than anything. It's gambling, right?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, if a gambler wants to engage with a sport, or if a gambler wants to gamble, and there's very little other live North American sports on when they're living in North America, they have some third, fourth division soccer and basketball in Eastern Europe. That's great. I'm a big fan of Belarus basketball, but I love watching the world's best athletes in a specific sport. And one of the great things that we have, and no disrespect to Belarus basketball, it just is what it is. Being able to watch the world's best men and the world's best women play in an Olympic sport live and bet on it, while I can watch it on Rock Channel or on ESPN Plus or on CBC or Sportsnet or just that That's pretty compelling. So I think the upside in the gambling space is massive. And, I think all that is going to do is going to add engagement. I mean, one of the reasons why I love fantasy sports so much growing up and still is it brings you deeper into the sport. It gets you to look at the stats and to really dive into what it takes to be a great curler or baseball player or football player or basketball player. That engagement level, I mean, that again, that's to me where that big upside is it's not necessarily owning the team, owning the league is vital. That is like an important kind of pick and shovel. But whoever owns the deeper fan relationship is ultimately going to be the one that really wins. And if we can create that flywheel to provide that opportunity, not only for fans, but for shareholders and for investors, then I think that gives the sport a lot of really exciting kind of growth opportunity.
You obviously been talking about the importance of having data for that. I mean, have you had to build the infrastructure to collect the data, or how are you going about that?
No, we partnered. We did that was part of our partnership with Alt Sports Data. So Alt built the actual platform itself, and then we collaborate on the operations of that platform. One of the most important things as it relates to gaming is obviously is data integrity. So it's vital that the data is not only collected efficiently and quickly, but that it is official and legitimate. And so we work very closely with Alt to make sure, and we have a head of data analytics that oversees all of the data capture at all of our events. And I mean, that's effectively what we partner with Alt. I mean, we're not as much as like we are not an events business. We are a media company. We are not necessarily a technology business, but we obviously utilize a lot of the technologies to help support the ecosystem around our media enterprise.
Great. Um, and look, you were making reference before to the fact that the sports investment landscape has changed quite dramatically over the last few years, right? Sovereign wealth funds, private equity, obviously family offices that have, really been spending a lot of capital, deploying a lot of capital into this space. So I'm not going to ask you what is the biggest opportunity they should be looking at, because I think you'll be biased. And I'm not going to ask you, what it is that make an investment property, investable, or a sports property rather investable, because of course we just be repeating the whole podcast. I think, you'll be giving us your views on that already. But let me ask you, you know, what do investors consistently get wrong in your view? What it is that they need to get better at, or, what it is that they do not understand about the world of sport.
Wow, that's another very, very good question. I mean, I think that when folks are investing in sport, there is a level of FOMO, right? That
Hmm.
gets them excited about it. And people see numbers about, revenue multiples, even of sports teams that are losing money. And they're getting, sports teams are losing money, they're getting 9, 10x revenue, and that's great. I mean, that's great for those teams. Um, you know, again, this is going to sound like I'm biased, but what I think some sports investors are missing out on, so a lot of them are relying on just the fact that the asset category in sport is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow because of scarcity, right? There's only so many sports teams out there that somebody can buy. I do think it's about owning the ecosystem around the team, or from, selfishly owning the ecosystem around a league. Right now, if you own an ecosystem
Hmm.
around the team and or an ecosystem around the league, it gives you so many different opportunities, or so much, it gives you more optionality on your investment, because then you're not just relying on one thing. If you're owning a team that's operating at a loss, and you're hoping that the revenue valuation is going to continue, if not grow, over years, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Um, Profitability and EBITDA is obviously extraordinarily important from an investment perspective. I think that it's hard to guess 10 years, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, where kind of the revenue multiple and where the market's going to go. So I think if you own an ecosystem, what you're doing as an investor is you're increasing your optionality on that investment. So if one of those five levers happens to become the next most valuable piece of the puzzle, well, you own that piece. You don't have to worry about acquiring it, because I think value comes from integration, not from acquisition, right? So, it goes back to what I was saying earlier too, is, I'd rather build value than buy it. And I think a lot of the investors now are buying value instead of trying to build it, or buy it and then trying to change it and shift it and evolve it within a structure that's already been pre-built. So yeah, I think the ecosystem play is, it's a little bit more capital intensive, straight up.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about one year,
Yeah.
but I think the ecosystem play, I think that's got a lot of opportunity. Again, I know I'm biased and I didn't mean to answer the question that way, although I guess I kind of did.
Wow, okay, that's good. As I said, it's good to see the passion that you have for this venture, for this sport. That's definitely. And look, let's finish with the future. What does success look like for the curling group over the next 5 years, over the medium term?
Again, great. It's a great question. I honestly, 5 years from now, I want, I want the world. I have I have big goals. I want the world to know the curlers, right? I
Hmm.
want the world to know who these amazing athletes are. I want to see a fully integrated ecosystem between, Grand Slam of curling and Rock League operating as complementary assets because they're not competitive, supported by, meaningful. And I know media rights are getting harder to come by from a cash perspective, but media rights to me also involves promotion and distribution and editorial and content support. So I want it supported. I want I want our assets to be supported by media rights, a thriving commercial business, obviously a growing fan base. I don't think success, because I said, we're not an events business, but I want to see bigger events, and I want to see events in other parts of the world, not just in Canada and then in the United States, right? And as I mentioned, Japan is our second biggest audience. The UK is our fourth biggest audience. Switzerland is our fifth biggest. I see the path is there. We just need to be able to get there. So I think 5 years from now, we're going to have the benefit of another massive Olympic boom, right?
Hmm.
France in 2030 is going to provide yet another, I call it lightning striking the clock tower moments, but it's true. It happens every 4 years. So I want to be able to, I don't see, curling typically has dealt with ebbs and flows. And some people are like, well, you want it to grow and then it's going to plateau, and then it'll drop a little bit. No, I see curling as a peak and then a steady growth and then a peak again and then steady growth and then a peak again, because those every 4 years, we know we have those big moments. So I think 5 years from now is going to be an even more kind of exciting moment. And then I'll tell you, I see the massive moment for curling. The Olympics are in the United States in 2034, right? US has a big growing curling population. Some of the there's curling clubs growing and building in some places in the United States you wouldn't think. And let's face it, the United States is still a very big epicenter for sponsor investment and for fan growth and for revenue generation. Having the Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2034, that is going to be a massive moment, not only for us, but for the sport of curling in the United States. So there's a couple big, huge moments coming for us.
Well, Nic, thank you very much. This has been super interesting. Thank you very much for joining us on the Berkida Ventures podcast. It's been a pleasure to be, discussing curling, learning more about it, and where can listeners learn more about the curling group and following what you're building?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me. A true pleasure. And I will say your hair looks fantastic. I hope that
Thank you.
comes across. You're very welcome.
Yeah.
No, if you can follow me on, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, but what I would say to folks who want to learn more about curling, follow the curlers. Follow wherever you're located. If you're in Japan, follow Chinami Yoshida. If you're in Switzerland, follow Alina Patz. If you're in Scotland, Follow Grant Hardy and Bruce Mowat and Hemi McMillan. If you're in Canada, Rachel Homan, follow Emma Miskew and Carrie Anderson and Brad Jacobs. If you're in the United States, follow Danny Kasper. If you're in Sweden, follow Anna Hasselborg and Sophia Mabergs. Like these and Isabella Rana, gold medalist, and her brother Rasmus. Like there are so many compelling athletes out there, and they're all across social telling their own stories. And I think that's how your audience could get to know the sport better than reading my posts and listening to me talk. It's listen to the curlers talk and then watch when the season starts in October.
Well, thanks very much for joining us again today. Great to have you, and speak soon, Nick.
Thank you, Massimo.